Everybody has asked for a budget build for me, but what are you trying to budget? Money or time? If you skimp on one too much, you'll regret it later, and you'll spend way more of it than you ever wanted to begin with. We've had to rethink how you can achieve all three. Save money, save time, and have longevity. Chris and Ryan from our Southeast shop made a kit with everything you need, from framing to the decking to the wiring to the accessories, that can be put together in one weekend with you and your friends. And they did a very thorough documentation on how they pulled it off. Super quick 10-second backstory for anybody who cares. Ryan and his friend Patrick built this boat on a budget, and it lasted for a pretty long time until it didn't. Now it's time to repair it, but this time we want it to be a final repair, which will look a lot better, perform a lot better, and last a lot longer, but is not so extensively long to build or costly. It also seems in the survey that you guys either own a 1436 John boat or some old StarCraft 14-foot V-hull. We've ironically got both of those covered now. Also, the more we interact with you and talk with you over our customer service line or through emails, it just seems that everybody just wants a nice basic kit full of everything. They don't want to go out and hunt everything, trace everything down, get everything, and then finally do the project. They just want one kit shipped to them with everything they need to build a boat in a weekend. They can go out and fish the season and do more of that. For more on this kit, please visit us at tvnation.net and search Weekend Warrior Kit. Not because you're a weekend warrior, but because it takes a weekend, and you know.
So one thing you're going to need to take into account, this bench seat and that bench seat are the same height, but this bench is taller than the height of those two. So we need to make sure that this is all going to be level. Next, we're going to get our lid. What we did, we started off with this header piece, riveted it to the front bench using standard rivets. Same thing with this header piece that's against the bench. Then we moved on to setting the backstop for the lid. Then we teed off these two pieces of angle to set the front of the lid. Then we teed off 4 more pieces to set where we wanted the lid to sit, and then made a backstop for the recessed foot tray. Now you can see we're just barely inside that hole. We could still get a rivet through that piece of angle. Right now what we're doing is I have 2 pieces cut. We're going to tee these off, same with that side, and we're going to basically make supports that are going to run right above where the rib is in the floor. That way we can vertically add some framing in here to keep everything supported. We do not have this teed off section riveted into place yet. You can see my 1-inch square tubing running vertically down onto that rib, and then we have about an 1.25 inch piece of angle right there that we're going to rivet to the rib. Then we're going to be able to run rivets from this side into the tubing, which will completely secure down the base of this vertical support. Then up top we have 2 sides that we can run rivets into, both from this side of the angle and from this side. Here's my support for the most outer vertical support. You can see we've already got that one completed. 2 rivets, the face of that, and then we got one going in on this side and one going in through this side on that angle. I do have 2 rivets in the bottom of this one. Be very careful when doing this that you don't drill through that rib and then down through the floor of the boat. That would not be good for you. No. So we got our 4 main vertical supports in with the 1-inch square tubing, but it wasn't quite enough. So we also added 1.5 inch angle, and we mounted it in an angle to give this end a little bit more support. So now that seemed to have done the trick. So should have around 6 total vertical supports in your. All right, we're gonna go ahead and start on this rear deck. You guys can see I have the header piece in and made sure it was level with the front of the deck like this. Now Chris is cutting out the pieces that we're gonna have running from the side. We already figured out where our lip overhang is gonna sit, and then we're gonna tee off 2 pieces again that run back here to the transom. We're gonna have a single piece of angle running to the outside, and another single piece on the very outside of the hole running back to there. And more than likely, we're gonna put a little self-tapping screw right there into the transom wood just to keep everything in place. We're almost finished with all the framing in the rear. We're 99% finished with the framing up front. So what Tim's already gonna go ahead and do is take this 1.5" PVC pipe. We're trying to make a way to funnel wiring from front to where our switch panel is gonna be over here on that catwalk.
Alright, so for the center floor section, your actual subfloor is going to come in a 16 by 60 piece. Now on this particular subfloor, our area is about 48 inches and 3/4, so I've cut a piece of 090 sheeting down to that size. Now because they're only 16 inches wide, you're going to have to use 2 to put in this floor, so we're going to butt 2 up next to each other. Now the way we're going to do the framing for this is we got a piece of angle, we've cut it, we're going to mount it right here up against this bench. We've got another piece of angle, we're going to do the same thing right back here. And then for the seam in the middle where our 2 panels meet, what I've done is I've taken a piece of angle, I've cut some notches in it to go over the ribs, and this will mount underneath that angle, and we'll rivet it in right here and right here. Now we got to make sure that this angle that's running down the middle is exactly on that seam, so it's going to need to be 16 inches from this edge to the center of here, and then we'll run another one 16 inches over that way. Take our next piece and we're going to butt it up to it, make sure everything is all nice and lined up, and then we're going to put a mark here, a mark here. This is going to be the edge of the floor, and it's also going to provide us some support for the wall right here. Go ahead and hold that in place and then throw a couple rivets in each side.
We started off with this piece of angle that we had already attached down into the subfloor area, so that was already there. Then we made our corner pieces with the brackets. Then we made our vertical support in the corner with brackets on both sides. We did those first. Then we laid in this piece across the top, and then we laid in this piece. Then we added this big long 48-inch piece across the front. Then we did the 48-inch piece across the back. But then we needed to make 2 more vertical supports, but we had to be a little strategic about that because we wanted to make sure that our electrical panel was large enough to accept stuff like the switch panel, the fuse block, the battery on-off switch, and the trolling motor circuit breaker that are included with the kit if you so choose. So what we did was we measured off of here 14 inches, made our line, and that is where we set the left-hand side of this vertical support right on that 14-inch line. And we did that for the same on this side, which leaves us with 18 inches, I believe. Yep, a little 18¼ inches here in order to make our electrical panel. Now this is going to be recessed, so we had to do a few extra things for this. We cut a piece the exact length here, cut that out, riveted that in. Then we cut a piece that would go from the top of that piece of angle all the way up on both sides, riveted that into place, and that's what's actually going to recess this panel. That way when we actually create the panel and we put it in, it's basically going to be 4 self-tapping screws here. That way if there's ever any issues, we just undo those screws and pull this panel out, and that'll give us access to the back side of the switch panel to do anything that we need to do to get whatever fixed. The only other problem after that was this rear piece didn't have a whole lot of support. It was very, very, very weak. So we ended up putting a couple pieces of angle, attached them to the outside of the tubing and up here on this piece of angle, which was another support that we added, and just tied everything in to give it all that structure. So now everything's good. This is freaking sturdy. These are the lights we're using. These are pretty inexpensive but yet pretty bright for what they are. LED little lights. You can get them on Amazon. I'll leave a link to them in the description. Patrick's over here making some brackets for them. Just folding it down so that it will actually like illuminate down into this where his actual hatch is at. I actually think that 1.5 inch piece is too much, so I'm going to use 1 inch. So here's one of the additions to the kit. This is the safety electrical portion of that kit. This is your front nav light. We have an 1.25 inch hole that we need to drill for the hole saw for this base to sit down into. So these are 2 separate pieces. We're going to center it up, put it right here, drill self-tapping screws in there, or rivets if you wanted to. Just kind of placing all this right now, getting all of our electrical components put into place where we want them. Lights up front, those are going to be on your deck light switch. Then we have under deck lights. We have one right here, right there. Those will be on a separate switch. We're going to put deck lights here, which are going to connect to the 3 that we have up front. We're going to put 2 more of those, one right here, one right there, because it's going to give it a cool little angle. And then we're going to do a couple back here just to give him some light back here as well. Alright guys, you're going to get 1 sheet of 050 that's already pre-cut, 16 by 60. I've trimmed this down to the 48 inches that I need because the reason you get this 1 sheet of 050 is to cover up this panel. So I'm going to go ahead and insert this right now. I have not trimmed the top of it yet. And if you are a little bit off down here at the bottom, like it's not completely matching up with your subfloor, that's okay. You have about 1/4 inch of play because your turf that's going to be going down in the cockpit is about 1/4 inch tall. So you do have a little bit of wiggle room at the bottom of this plate. So this is the back side of what is going to be our electrical panel. It's going to sit inside this 1.5 inch angle on this far side and also right in there. We traced this out because we know that we need to make that as a cut, and then we'll essentially have what we need that's going to fit down into the area for the 1.5 inch angle to actually recess it. But before we do that, we're going to have to make one other cut down here as well because we have a little bit of a jump right there. But let's go ahead and get the majority of this traced out. Alright, I just got this piece cut out. Looking good. So far so good. Here is the piece that came out of there. What I'm gonna do is make sure that this fits right back in here, which it does. But you can see I have a double lip right here. So actually I want this panel to be sitting up on top of this piece of 1.5 inch angle. So what I'm gonna do again, make a mark piece as well. I'll just run this line out to the edges so that I know where to start and stop, and then we'll put it back in and it should be right. Yeah, you know. All right, we got it in. This is the final product right here. Well, close to it. That's gonna be our electrical panel, which is cool because Patrick plans to put, you know, a speaker on this side and a speaker on that side. So, but, you know, later on down the road when all that happens, this is already set. It's gonna look good. So we have one interior light right in there. We have one right there. We have another one on this opposite side. All of our wiring is running into that tube, which feeds up to that switch panel or the catwalk. But we have a bilge pump wire already ran, this little accessory light, which we put one on each side, and the wires for these interior lights are all going through there. Everything runs down that tube, out right here inside this catwalk. What I generally like to do is put the lights in place where I want them, then connect all the wires back like Patrick's doing right now, and then run it all back to my central location. Subfloor's in. We made this entire panel. I sanded it with 80 grit sandpaper on an orbital sander just to clean up all these rough edges and to make the whole thing look good, because I think I'm gonna have to end up painting that. Came out really good. This is the actual face of the panel that's gonna go in there. Up here, all the framing's done. We have 2 interior lights for this hatch. Patrick made little brackets for them at a 1.5 inch angle so that they're pointed down into the compartment. So when you open the lid, you're not gonna be blinded, but you still have light down in there to see. Up here, we installed 3 lights that are gonna be on the deck. So we got one in this corner, one in the middle, and one over here. They're very bright. They should do pretty good at lighting up the entire front deck. We have the port for the front nav and our wire already there. We already made the hole for the graph that's gonna go right there. You can see the location of the old one. And then we gotta figure out the trolling motor mount and the trolling motor wiring tomorrow, which is what that 8-gauge wire is in the kit. 2 full sticks left and a bunch of little tiny scraps, and we also have 1 full stick of 1x1 tube, which I think we also have some 050 left over. Basically raise this rear floor by 1 inch using that tube. Then we're gonna skin it with that aluminum on top of it. That way we can put the batteries in a battery tray and screw everything down so the batteries don't move. This is also gonna give him, he has a lot more room back here now than he did before. So we're kind of hoping that we can find a way for him to put like some type of crate in here, throw some things in, maybe co-angler. We're gonna have the bilge pump somewhere in here. So we're gonna have a battery. They're gonna be on little stands that are gonna get turf, and then the battery trays are gonna go on, and everything's gonna look nice and clean. We're pretty excited about it. We would show you guys the lights, but I think we're gonna wait for that and kind of tease you guys with it. But tomorrow, Chris is gonna finish off the wiring and the panel with you guys. We need to put the 090 sheeting down on the decks, and then install the hydro turf, and then this thing's done. Yeah, it's
Quick reminder that if you like this kit, you can find it on our site, tvnation.net, search Weekend Warrior Kits.
So our next thing to do is lay out our switch panel, and I've got everything on here that I need lined up and just kind of drawn out so I know about where everything's going to be. I started by marking a line straight across right here so that I could see where the center line is, and then I marked 2 lines over here on each edge since this is where it is going to mount, and I want to make sure that nothing is going to get drilled through right here because this is where we're going to put some self-tapping screws to hold this panel in place. Over here on the far left, I've got our battery on-off switch. Now the way we're gonna mount this is not surface mount, we're actually gonna flush mount this. So the way you do that, you line all this up, put your 4 holes in there so you know where to drill your screw holes, and then you find your center by marking an X between those screw holes, and you use a 2-inch hole saw bit to drill a hole right through the front face of this. Then you'll drill out your 4 screw holes, and we'll mount this from the back side with the screws going into here, and that will give it a nice flush mount. So when it's completed, all you'll see is just that switch right there. The next thing up is I've lined up our switch panel and put it in place and kind of marked where all the switches and stuff are going to go, and the voltmeter down here at the bottom. Now the way I do this is I get a hole saw that's a little bit bigger than this, and I will drill a big hole, and then I'll just kind of come in here and I will cut with a jigsaw around this area where all of the switches are going to be. and kind of tie it back into that little hole right there. Then of course we'll drill our 4 holes right there. We'll use some self-tapping screws to tap this into place. We can move on to our actual fuse panel, and it's going to sit right over here. Now I don't have to make any cuts for the fuse panel. I'm just simply going to mount it up here. I'm going to put 4 self-tapping screws in to hold it in place. Then I'm going to take on each one of these sides, I'm going to drill holes for our wires to pass through the panel and come up into our actual fuse block right here. I'll do that for both sides of the positive, and I'll do it for all of the negatives, and then I'll do it for the main positive going right here and the main negative going right here, and those 2 will go back out to the battery.
It is Sunday, last day to get the Weekend Warrior complete. I'm gonna start off by making that little subfloor in the back for the batteries to sit on. Put the decks down, turf, and we'll be ready. Here is the rear floating floor that I designed and made. Batteries on the left and right. You got a little space in the middle. Put some stuff on the back side. We used the extra stick of 1.5 inch angle that we had. It's gonna look just like that. We painted the edge of it. We're gonna turf it so that it looks good. Then we're gonna put a battery tray. All right, we're working on the bilge pump right now, the hosing. Okay, so we're working with the bilge pump right now. What I first did was made this bracket out of extra piece of 050 aluminum sheeting. I bent the corner into a 90 with a vise. Put 2 drill holes in there for either countersink rivets or stainless steel self-tapping screws. The idea behind this, I'm gonna do it on this side, but to show you guys, I'm gonna put it over here. I'm gonna rivet it or screw it in. This is the bottom of the bilge pump. It detaches from the pump and gives you a mounting point. So I also pre-drilled the holes, countersunk them, so I'm gonna be able to attach this. So then we'll screw that in, but before I do that, I'm gonna go ahead and turf the floor of this.
All right, so depending on how you decide to set your trolling motor up and how you do your decking, you may need a different size bracket. This one is a 3 to 4 inch bracket. You may need one that's taller, you may need one that's lower. You're just gonna really depend on how tall your deck is. So for this particular one, we are out of the 4 to 6 brackets today, so I'm gonna use this 3 to 4, and the way that I modified it is I took 2 pieces of our tube, cut them down to size to fit in between the actual trolling motor mount and then the bracket itself. And then on the front side, I just used 2 rivets right here to mount it into the top of that tube. And then down here, I've used 2 stainless steel self-tapping screws. That will allow me to take this thing off so that we can mount it into the floor. And this is where it will mount onto the floor. Trolling motor here in a second, and this is how this is gonna work. We'll undo these 2 self-tapping screws, rivet this into the decking right here, and then we can reinstall this, put our 2 self-tapping screws in, and then up here, we'll use some more rivets to rivet this into the front of the boat right here on the bow. But that's how everything's gonna lay out. The only thing I've got left to do is drill my hole for my wires, and I'm just gonna go in and measure my wires. I believe all these are gonna be 14 and 16 gauge, and these up here on top and bottom are gonna be 8 gauge. So I'll just figure out what size wire that is, and I'll drill a hole right here on each side for all of those wires to pass through. Now I have all my holes drilled for my wires to pass from the back side of the panel up over here. For these smaller connections for your positive and your negative bus bars, all of those holes I drilled were 3/16, and that will fit a 14 gauge wire no problem. And for these 2 bigger lugs for my main positive coming from the battery and the main negative coming from the battery, I drilled those at 5/16, and that will fit 8 gauge wire through there. Now another thing you can do is you can drill these holes even bigger and get some rubber grommets and stick rubber grommets in there if you want to make this look a lot nicer. But we're in a little bit of a rush today, so we're just going to leave these holes like that and take this all apart and get this thing painted so we can get this thing installed.